Welcome and thank you for joining us today for The Network Source of Truth, how engineering teams establish and use these critical tools. My name is Raleigh Gould and I'll be moderating today's event. Our featured speaker is Shamus McGillicuddy, VP of Research covering network infrastructure and operations at EMA. Shamus has nearly 2 decades of experience in the IT industry. His research focuses on all aspects of managing enterprise networks, including network automation, AI ops-driven network operations, multi-cloud networking, and WAN transformation. While Seamus will defer answering your questions until the conclusion of today's event, we do encourage you to log your questions anytime by using the Q&A functionality. Also, today's event is being recorded, and you will receive a follow-up email from EMA with the on-demand playback, as well as a link to this new research. So I hope you'll check that email out. And now I'd like to go ahead and turn things over to our featured speaker, Shamus McGillicuddy. Shamus?
Thank you, Raleigh, and thank you everyone for joining us. I am the head analyst at EMA for all things network infrastructure and operations, and today you are here to learn about my research into the concept of a network source of truth. I would first like to thank the sponsors of this research who made it financially possible to do it. That includes these two vendors here, Efficient IP and Infoblox, two vendors who are very much interested in the concept of a network source of truth and offering solutions for it. So why did I do this research and how did I do it? I wanted to tell you that first before I actually tell you what I found out. Um, so I have been talking to people about a network source of truth for a number of years now, and I feel like the concept has really kind of gone mainstream. Uh, 2016, DigitalOcean, a cloud provider, I guess you could describe them as that, or an infrastructure provider, uh, open source Netbox, which was a tool created internally that sort of hybridized IP address management and data center infrastructure management, specifically the inventory management capabilities of DCIM's tools, and had an extensible data model that sort of integrated how people might manage or document at least those two areas of infrastructure documentation. And it has taken off like wildfire since then. I see open source adoption of that tool in a lot of places. And why is that? Well, people started to identify this concept of a network source of truth around 2018, 2019 to describe an authoritative repository of network data. Um, why did they need that authoritative repository of network data? Well, that research that you're here to listen to me talk about will answer that question specifically. But um, I part of it is people are starting to mature their approach to network automation, and network automation tools need to reference an authoritative set of network data to make sure that the changes it makes on your network reflect what you want it to look like and do. Um, and I started asking about the concept of network source of truth in my network automation research. Every 2 years or so, I'll survey hundreds of people who are responsible for network automation strategy or execution in their IT organizations, mostly in the enterprise world. And in 2022, I said, "Hey, do you have this thing that you might be able to describe as a network source of truth?" And in 2022, 52% said yes. And then in 2024, I asked the same question in a similar type of research, surveying hundreds of network automation experts. And 80% said they had a network source of truth or something approximating that. And I say it that way because I feel that a lot of people disagree about what a network source of truth is and how you would attain one and maintain one. But 80% said they thought they had a network source of truth in 2024 for, specifically in the context of, talking about their network automation tool sets. But only 20% of them believed or claimed that that network source of truth they had was completely effective for their needs. So that kind of begs the question, like, oh, maybe I should do research on this. Um, I also feel like the whole concept of network source of truth is at an inflection point. My assessment, or and therefore EMA's assessment, because I run EMA's approach to network infrastructure and operations. So my say goes. My assessment is that engineering teams need programmatic access to network data as they mature automation. Many of today's network source of truth implementations are projects, not products. They are building stuff. They are using lots of different things and tying it together. They are using open source tools and modifying it, relying on a lot of coding capability to make it useful. Um, Not a lot of them are paying for it, but more and more they are, which is why you see an ecosystem of vendors emerging who are interested in providing solutions for a network source of truth. Some of them are net new startups that have emerged over the last 4, 5, 6 years. Maybe 6 years is pushing it. And then others are from industries that are adjacent to uh, network source truth. I specifically said, for instance, that a network source of truth, a popular network source of truth tool is Netbox, and that is a hybridized capability that, offers IPAM functionality, DCIM functionality, and some other stuff. And well, there are a lot of IPAM vendors, including the two that sponsored this research, who could evolve their products to address a lot of what's needed from a network source of truth. There are other vendors in other markets. I think a lot of the vendors that provide like commercial network automation platforms have built out a source of truth capability within their product, although they also feel the need to integrate with network source of truth tools like DDI vendors and Netbox and other things because a lot of engineering teams have very specific thoughts about how they want their network source of truth to be. Um, and they might say, well, network automation vendor, you have what I would describe as a network source of truth capability in your tool because you need good data to drive automation through your platform. But I don't like the way you model it, or I don't like the gaps that you have in it. There are certain types of data you can't put in there that I'd like in there. So I want you to integrate with this science project that I've been working on for 4 years. So anyway, it's kind of a mess and there's lots of projects and not a lot of products. But engineering teams have an opportunity to mature the network source of truth solutions, and thus further mature their approach to network automation. And let's just admit that it's not just network source of truth tools that are like science projects. Like network automation is a science project for a lot of people too. I'll go to AutoCon and listen to someone talk about how they solve the use case with network automation by stitching together 5, 6, 8, 10, 12 different open source software tools. That might be some of you might be listening and being like, yeah, that's great. I mean, to be able to build that from all those different pieces is great. But then like a CIO might be like, what kind of technical debt is that? What if that person leaves? I got to hire someone that knows how to use all or work with all 7, 10, 12 open source tools that he cobbled together into this, and then all the coding and scripting and so forth that's connected to it that makes it usable. So, yeah, what's the best path forward for network source of truth if for all these people that want to mature their network automation and minimize technical debt and build for the future? That's where I am at in this research. So my goals for it were to define, quote, network source of truth, quote, unquote. Um, And I don't know if everyone's going to agree with me. Actually, I think most people will, but I think others will be like, oh man, I don't even know if the sponsors of this research are going to agree with me. Um, but I wanted to identify why a network source of truth is needed and how they're used. I also wanted to help IT pros, network engineers, network DevOps engineers, network automation engineers, network architects understand how they could and should establish and maintain a network source of truth and help them define their requirements as they start to engage with vendors who might say to them, "Hey, I know you have this homegrown tool or this open source tool that's serving as your network source of truth. We would really love to take you to the next level with this product." And when they say that, you can then say, "Well, can you do this, 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 and this? I read this report that said you should." Not that I'm suggesting that I am the definitive expert on what you should tell your vendors to give you. Um, you'll know better than I do, I think. But I'm trying to give you some tips and some things to think about. My research methodology. This is not survey-based data. I didn't survey people for this research. I went and found people that were building or using what they thought of as a network source of truth. And I spent 60 to 90 minutes talking to each of them individually about what they're doing and what's going on with their network source of truth. So I talked to network engineers, network automation engineers, net DevOps engineers, and people who lead teams of those people from 17 organizations. Talked to a global automobile manufacturer that also makes bigger vehicles and automobiles. I talked to someone from I talked to people from 7 different Fortune 500 companies in different markets. 6 companies that aren't in the Fortune 500 but generate $1, 2, 3 billion or more a year. I talked to someone at an internet exchange, a large public university, and a mid-sized energy company. Some stragglers there who didn't fit into the $1 billion or higher window. That global automobile manufacturer definitely makes tens of billions of dollars a year too. So, but they weren't in the Fortune 500 because they're not headquartered in the right place. Um, anyway, so what is a network source of truth? Here I am trying to arrive at a definition that won't piss off too many people. I think it's a system or repository that documents, models, and maintains the intended state of production network. I say a system or a repository because it might be a system of repositories. You might have multiple things syncing together. Maybe you have something that syncs with multiple things. Um, in, in any case, it maintains the intended state of a production network. How does it do that? We'll get into that in a second. It should also have open APIs that provide programmatic access to its data model. Oh, and that data model should be highly extensible. Um, and should do a few other things as well that I'll get into a little bit, either here or in the full report that this research is based upon that you can download from the websites of the 2 sponsors, or you can go to our website and get it. Here's an example of the things that people told me, a couple examples of things that people told me about what a network source of truth means to them. So, network automation engineer at a multi-billion-dollar gaming company that some of your kids probably use every day. It's a place where you model your production network the way you intend it to work. It should be able to answer any question about what a network looks like or is supposed to look like at any given point in time. What a network looks like or is supposed to look like. Those are 2 very different things, by the way. Network looks like suggests state of the network, whereas supposed to look like suggests network intent. And those are 2 different things. So even he is kind of hedging on that, um, because I think it's very rare to have a tool that can do both of those things. And then this network automation engineer at a large North American university, public university, I believe. I should probably go to their website to verify that, but it's got a state's name in it, so I'm going to just say it's probably public. The source of truth is our intended state for not only what devices we have, but also what their configuration should be and how they should be connected. It is a system in which we have declared our intent for the network, and everything should be based off of it. So that person is clearly staking out that it's network intent. And most of the people I talked to said it is network intent, not state. State is something that you would pull from your live network, discover off your live network. How are those devices configured? What are they connected to? Things like that. Intent is these things. the essentials on the left. What data lives in a network source of truth? Because it is all about data. It is fundamentally about documenting things, but it's about the data of that documentation, putting in that documentation in a data model that becomes programmatically accessible to many different things, not just not just network automation tools, by the way, but we'll get into that in a second. So the things I heard most consistently from people was it needs to have inventory data, which you might traditionally find in a DCIM tool. Um, so I want device makes and models, rack unit elevation, rack elevations, what's connected to things, topology and connectivity information, but also like what's actually there. What's the software version on that device? Um, what's the support contract? What is the end of life date and end of support date? Things like that. And then IP space, IP addresses, subnets, things like that. IP address plans, policies. They want that in there too, and then they want topology and connectivity information, and they want all of that in a flexible, extensible data model, so they can reference everything and make connections between everything and pull information they need, and also have workflows where a network engineer can go and see this is the IP address associated with this device, or this group of these are the addresses associated with these devices, which are made by this company and are um, located here in this physical closet at this physical level that and is connected to these other devices and this is the phone number I call if something's wrong with it. And that's just getting started. And then what I found was like from there, the conversations about what data needs to live in a network source of truth would vary based on like what the person was responsible for, what their business needs were, and what they were trying to do with a network source of truth. So, for instance, like, um, oh, if someone was like a wide area, a network engineer focused on a wide area network, then they were really interested in like documenting their WAN circuits and like and they'd want the inventory information about the devices where those WAN circuits terminated, and but they'd also want like, hey, what's the SLA on this circuit? What's the what's the bandwidth? Who do I call if something's wrong with it? Um, things like that. Security policies might be of interest if you're trying to do a lot of zero trust provisioning, through a network source of truth. Raw configuration files were usually stored elsewhere. I talked to maybe one or two people that thought that a source of truth should contain your configuration files. Those people are usually using like an NCM tool, but more likely, what I see is like they're using GitHub or Git or whatever, because they want that because that's what they've designated as their source of truth is like the config files that they've backed up from their network and they're golden configs, and they're going to just compare those golden configs to the configs on their networks, and if they're out of sync, then they're going to correct it somehow. However, that programmatic access to those config files is hard to work with, hard to do, and so it limits, I think, what you can do with a source of truth. I'm not, but I wouldn't say that definitively like you can't have a config files and a source of truth. I think like, but you're going to need a tool that is highly extensible, highly flexible if you want that stuff to live meaningfully with your intent data that is being because basically what I'm saying is the stuff on the left, inventory data, IP space information, topology, connectivity information, is basically config information abstracted into um, structured data. Because what people tell me is they want a network source truth to be able to basically generate a config on demand because it's their expressed intent for the network. And if they express their intent for the network correctly, then that network source truth should be able to spit out a config for a device based on what you're asking it for. And, like this is, I wanted a config I want to generate a config for this type of network device that lives here. It's going to be doing this, etc. Um, so, oh, sorry. Yeah. So why do you need a network source of truth? I got to ask that question before I go to the next slide. Um, there's a network documentation problem. That's like probably the most basic thing I was hearing was that people just felt like their data was a mess, and they weren't always motivated by a desire to have programmatic access to it for network automation tools. They were saying, I just need to clean up my data. I need to document my data. I don't know what I have. Um, because pretty much all network operations workflows require data gathering, for instance. Like, I need to gather data to do this, or I need to gather data to understand that. It needs to be accessible conveniently, quickly, and it has to be good data. The person in the midst of that workflow doesn't have the time to think about whether the data is accurate. Unfortunately, a lot of times they have to think about that because the data is a mess and they know it. They're like, hey, I heard they go like some NetOps tier one guys like or tier two guys like I'm trying to solve this problem. And I know that one thing I need to know is like what's the IP address range associated with this thing that I'm looking at here? I know that Chuck has a spreadsheet on his laptop that originally defined this, and I don't even know if it's going to be good. Should I ask him for it? Because I heard he doesn't like to share it. Um, so yeah, that's what we're talking about here. Data is scattered, data is untrusted. No one knows how the network is supposed to behave and what is connected to it. This network automation software engineer, that's what his title was, at a Fortune 500 technology company, said, when I was a network engineer at a large financial services company, I'm not going to tell you which one because I gave these guys anonymity. We had a device that was online for 10 years with an active Verizon circuit that no one knew was there. Everything was disconnected from this device except the circuit. It was sitting there for 10 years collecting a bill in a bank. And so, like, no one knew it existed because it wasn't documented. And he had to go, people probably had to go in there and think about, like, okay, I know it's not connected to anything, but will anyone get mad if I like cancel this circuit? Like I call Verizon, tell them to turn it off. Um, that is just the perfect example of why everything's a mess. Um, Urgency came along because then people, as I said, started maturing their network automation practice. They started building stuff, or they start, I talk to a lot of people who just have built a ton of network automation in-house. They have they're usually network automation. They're usually network engineers who knew CLI in and out, and then they started learning Python, and then they like built a team of Python guys who knew networking, and then they're like, "Wow, this is getting big and awesome. Let's hire some actual software developers and teach them concepts of networking, and then we'll build something even bigger." And they need a network source of truth because of all the reasons I laid out before. Network automation needs programmatic access to your intent for the network, your intent for the network. That is did I mention that that's my part of my definition for network source of truth? I think I did, but anyway. So this network engineer at a Fortune 500 financial services company, he said the goal is to take all that information that is scattered everywhere, that is of dubious quality, and put it in a structured data format that an application or script can then read and execute on. That is it. That's it in a nutshell. This automation architect at a multi-billion-dollar gaming company with a network source of truth, you can have a robust automation pipeline with proper standards in place. Your network will behave in a predictable manner, and you generally are less susceptible to unexpected consequences resulted from things like config changes. Incidentally, I'm publishing research next month on AI-driven network operations. And I remember very clearly someone telling me, I will never let AI make a config change, ever. And you know why he said that? Because he had really bad data. He didn't trust AI to make config changes on his network because he had also told me that his network was a mess. His data was a mess. He said that he needed AI to clean up his network data. That's what he said. He's like, I think one of the first things that I will use AI for is to clean up my network data. Do you think it can do that? And I'm like, I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, so that research comes out in the mid-January. Check it out. It's gonna be fun. That one is based on survey research, but I did talk to a bunch of people one-on-one for that as well. All right, so how do you establish your network source of truth? So first off, you need to identify and validate key sources of data. That's the thing on the left there. And you see this net DevOps architect at a multi-billion-dollar European media company saying, quite honestly, it was rarely in one place. We'll create an inventory, then figure out where the source of truth is for each data domain. So like, it's painful. It's painful for a lot of people. You'll find that like some of the data is easy to identify and easy to validate because it's probably living in like a commercial tool. Like maybe you've got like Cisco Catalyst Center that knows a lot about your Cisco stuff, but then you have like stuff from another vendor and it's like completely messed up. And also like you'll find that Cal Center doesn't have everything you want to know about your network. Especially if you're multi-vendor, but also there's just certain things that it doesn't know, for instance, right? And so you go and you find that's on a spreadsheet. That thing there is on a spreadsheet. That's on a wiki. That's actually in a that thing there, that piece of information lives on a Visio diagram that was made 10 years ago. So we'll probably have to look at it and then like sort of look at the networks, the live network and figure out if it's still an accurate picture. That's what people are doing. Then you look for a tool with an extensible schema or data model that can model this data. Network automation architect at that multi-billion-dollar gaming company that I've now quoted for a third time here. A lot of what we did in the beginning was focused on getting the right data model in place. It needs to be flexible. Some people might want it to have like version control around it or branching. It needs to be able to take on data that you didn't think you'd need in there 3 or 4 years ago, for instance. Um, Next up, you're going to clean up that data and import it. Yeah, network engineer, multi-billion-dollar media company who makes movies you like and maybe TV shows and maybe has a newscast you watch. Said it was a lot of cleaning up of our spreadsheets and making sure we were mapping everything from the old ways into the new ways, into the new system. People writing scripts, writing that to move that data, converting things into CSV files, all kinds of stuff. But yeah, clean it up, import, and then validate and reconcile data over time to preserve quality. Network operations manager at a billion-dollar logistics company says we do regular audits in which we compare the source of truth in our NSoT with live device configs and update as necessary to fix any discrepancies. And that is something that they'll be writing scripts for, or they might be buying a tool to do it for them because they don't, or some of them are using open source tools and integrating them with their network source of truth to do that. But others are like, well, this is when I need a vendor to get that capability to validate and reconcile data over time. So then I said, hey, what do you need in that network source of truth? What are the essential capabilities? And these are the things I heard consistently. And I've kind of mentioned this already. A robust, extensible data model. What does that look like? What does that mean? Go find out. Integrated workflows and reporting across data silos, which is why people often will sync with a bunch of different tools and pull that stuff into something centralized, and then that has an extensible data model and allows them to work with different types of data within the same workflows and generate reports across those data silos in one unified extensible data model. They want open, modern APIs for customization and integration. Those open, modern APIs must be very well documented and updated, and documentation must be updated in a timely manner. It needs to be. Most of the people I talk to are like, if there's like functionality or data I cannot get through the API, then they're letting me down. This open source project or this vendor are letting me down, especially in this context. They also want platform security and multi-tenancy. So role-based access control, tenant capabilities. Like one person I talked to said that like he had like 7 or 8 different network engineering teams that had overlapping areas of responsibility. He needed to be able to define the where the overlapping responsibility was, like what devices they could touch, what sites they could interact with. Um, and then some of the advanced emerging features that I think people are wanting, discovery, which I don't think is even advanced anymore. I think this is becoming default needed. Um, just a lot of people I talked to didn't really think it was widely available yet, but it really depends on what you're using. Like to be able to discover what's on your network and um, use that as a way to document your network. Like, okay, I've discovered that this is what the network looks like. Now let's think about whether it's the way I want it to be. Now, at least I know what's out there. Um, now we start the project of looking at the data that is gathered through this discovery process and figuring out if it is the intent we want for our network, and then define it as intent within our network source of truth, and periodically rediscover the network to make sure nothing has changed without our permission, because let's face it, people make manual changes all the time that make the state of the network drift from whatever intent we have declared at some point. Branching just means being able to like plan, design, propose changes to your network source of truth without actually making changes to the source of truth. A lot of people feel constrained by the tools they have that don't allow them to do that. Like basically any change I make is going to change what's in my source of truth. I don't have the flexibility to like create a little branch of the data model where I can work on this project and then like have someone else approve it um, and then converge it back into the central data model as a change to the overall network intent once it's been approved by whoever needs to approve it. That's something that people are starting to ask for, and something you're starting to see from vendors. And then agentic AI integration, MCP servers, like integrations with LLMs that they've trained internally. Like some of the people I was talking to were saying, I see a huge opportunity for AI to um, have agentic access to my tool, my network source of truth tool, um, to train it on to use it to train an AI model internally about my network, things like that are that was spontaneously mentioned by several people, whereas like 2 or 3 years ago, I don't think anyone would have been thinking about it. Vendors want to sell you a network source truth, so what should you demand from them? Here's like I asked them, I asked all these people who are using like open source or home, because most of the people I talked to were using open source or homegrown tools. I should have mentioned that at the outset if I didn't, for a network source of truth. A few of them were using commercial products, but most of them were like either using open source or a few of them had built something. Anyway, so I asked them like, hey, if a vendor comes to you and says, I have a network source of truth product I'd love you to try, like, what do you want from them to sell you on the idea and make it worth the effort to work with them as opposed and change course or whatever, you know? Um, Number one thing I heard was pre-sales engineering support. Seems pretty simple. Help us build a proof of concept and make a business case. It's really important to build a business case for a network source of truth because um, CIOs have no idea what you're talking about when you talk about needing a network source of truth. They're like, what the hell is that? I've never heard of that. Well, it's a term of art that was coined um, on a couple of blogs in 2018, 2019, and I think it was it's basically a reference to an open source tool that came out like 9 years ago, and I've decided that that kind of tool is valuable and we need to spend $50,000 on it. And then the CIO is like, well, I, I mean, okay, but you said there's an open source tool that people are using. Why aren't you just using that? So yeah, help me build a proof of concept and build a business case. People I talked to said that a lot of some of the people I talked to said their use of open source network source of truth was basically a proof of concept to build a business case. And yes, they've been in production with that open source tool for like 2, 3 years, but it was still a proof of concept that they're hoping to turn into a commercial solution that would be more mature and reduce technical debt. Number two, flexible, extensible data models. I guess I keep harping on this, but one person kind of pointed out to me in an interesting way. He's like, this guy said, this is paraphrasing what he said, but like in 2 years, I'll be building AI factories. Can you model my GPU clusters and fabric connections? That's not necessarily something that people were thinking about when they built a network source of truth tool 4 or 5 years ago, right? Maybe it's not that big a leap to make that change, but in some ways it might be. Number three, deep integration with everything, especially existing automation frameworks. Don't disrupt my tool chain. Like this was a common thing. If I'm going to put a commercial solution in there, that's definitely going to help me. It needs to also not hurt me by breaking all the stuff that I currently have integrated with my homegrown source of truth. And then event-driven automation. Help me consolidate and integrate observability with network source of truth and automation. I started hearing from people that were saying that it's not just about like giving programmatic access to my network automation tools. I also want to sort of consolidate operations into my network source of truth. So for instance, like I look up intent for this part of my network, I'd also love to have um, like performance and fault information there for my observability tools. And if I want to investigate that state of the network in that context, I click on it, it takes me to the observability tool, or maybe it takes me to like a widget in my network source of truth that is pulled from my network observability tool. And so I'm not just like doing network automation, I'm doing like day 0 through 3 operations in the context of my network source of truth. And so that's something that will appeal to a lot of people in the future. What challenges might you encounter? Man, am I running low? Okay, I think I can go for a little bit longer. So first, management doesn't buy in. CIO, I referenced this already, but CIOs, VPs, directors need to be educated about the network source of truth concept. It is a new tool. It is a new line item in a budget potentially. You probably are. I mean, a lot of people tell me that, you know, they never, it's like, oh yeah, I get like a $10 million budget for hardware, but I never get, but like I have to build a business case for 50,000 bucks for a piece of software to manage it over and over again. And so a lot of them are just like, oh, I'm just going to use open source tools and do the best I can. Um, and so you need to educate management about why a network source of truth is of value. And I hope that this webinar has done that to some extent so far, because like I said, it's a new line item, and unless you build it yourself, you're gonna have to get that budget. And as I kind of alluded to already, like an open source proof of concept is a good start. Like, hey, I'm going to use this open source tool and show how valuable this is, but then I'm going to point out what more I need and how vendors could help me, like take me to the next level with like agentic access and um, uh, network observability integration and discovery and validation, being able to very easily compare intent to state through integrations that my vendor has done for me. It's network engineering. Yeah, network engineering engineer. That should say network engineering director. Sorry. At a large American university said it's very difficult to have a business justification when we also have a fairly stacked engineering team. He was actually the person that talked to me about how he has a hard time justifying a $50,000 expense on a management tool when even though like he spends like $10 million every few years on network hardware. Populating network sources of truth can cause pain. Finding, cleaning, and importing the data is time-consuming and difficult. As this network automation engineer at a large American university said, it's always a pain because you have little spreadsheets, you'll have documentation, you'll have a Visio diagram in someone's SharePoint, and someone else has a wiki. And how do you know? Like, you don't even know this stuff exists sometimes, And then you have to, so you discover it, and then you get access to it, and then you try to figure out if it's any good. Some data requires physical access to equipment, like this network engineer at Internet Exchange pointed out, and he was not the only one to say something like this. Capturing all the things that don't happen online is the most difficult problem. There's a physical cable patch between this port and this port. Somebody needs to write that down. We have incomplete data because not everybody does that consistently. So humans are a huge part of the problem here. Um, and that means you need to adopt a culture of rigor around documentation. Because this whole webinar started out by saying network documentation is a mess. It's a historic mess. And you need to get better at it. And you're not going to solve it just with tools. You need to solve it with people. But fundamentally, adopting a network source of truth with really robust discovery capabilities will address a lot of this. Not everything, but a lot of it. And just talking about that mess that is a human problem, not just a technology problem. Network engineers resist change. Not all of them. Some of them, like, are trying to build a faster than light drive to go to the future, or maybe a time machine's a better way of saying it. But engineers will cling to the past. They're hoarding spreadsheets and scripts on their laptops. They're going straight to CLI, despite you telling them that they need to do any sort of automated change through your network automation tool, which would then reference your intent for the network, your network source of truth for any change, and ensure that that change complies with your network intent expressed within your network source of truth. All that breaks when someone's just going to CLI, right? And then you got to go back to this slide, and be like, well, there's now data out there that I need to discover and find and document and validate. Anyway, this network engineer at a Fortune 500 financial services company says it's a cultural shift. It's a political thing in some places. You might have a mid-level director who's like, my entire power base is my entire reason for existing is being able to manage CLI experts. And now you're telling me those guys can't use CLI. Um, they're going to be mad at me and they're going to quit. And then I don't have a reason to exist. So you're dealing with that. Um, so how do you deal with this? On the right-hand side, demonstrate the power of your platform. Be like, hey, look at how easy it is to just know that all this data is good and you can find it here. You can write a script to pull it out, or you can use this tool to pull it out, or use this tool to just reference it and drive automated change across 500 devices within 10 minutes, as opposed to spending 2 weeks making those changes manually and not even being able to say that you did it properly because you don't have a way of referencing whether intent aligns with the state that you created through your manual approach. Also, ensure that UX meets their expectations, the quality of that tool, this feature set, the user experience, the user interface. Don't deploy a tool that is just going to look like something completely unfamiliar to them. People like their network source of truth tools because they say, this just works the way a network engineer would want it to work. And I'm not saying like, oh, you go into CLI and you make the change. It's just that data is organized in a way that network engineers like. Um, think about that when you're adopting a tool. All right, final thoughts. Network source of truth is bigger than automation. Network automation engineers trigger many NSoT projects, as this person at the multi-billion-dollar media company said, when you try to move to an API-based approach with data consumption for automation, you have to be able to expose that data in a structured programmatic way. But network sources of truth can also transform all of NetOps. Validation and consolidation of data streamlines day 0 through day 2 operations. This person at the Fortune 500 technology company said it best. If you're troubleshooting an issue, actually knowing what's on the network and how devices are interacting with each other really helps a lot. Rather than go into a command line, a real accurate source of truth can help with troubleshooting issues very well. So getting started, evaluate the state of your intent data, select a platform with a flexible, extensible data model, and powerful APIs for data ingestion and tool integration. Validate and clean, consolidate your data and get it in there, and then protect your network source of truth. Protect it. Shaky adoption is going to cause this is also a typo, huh? Can compromise network source of truth data. You can incentivize use. You can implement controls to make sure people don't go outside your tools. But hey, you know, put, do you want to revoke access to CLI? Probably not, but there are things you can do to make sure that people are only making changes the way you want them to make it, and integrate validation tools to compare intent and state. Um, that means like a discovery tool that pulls state from the network and allows you to compare with what you have for intent. All right, so access the full report for in-depth insights available from our website or for free from our sponsors, sorry. The sponsors are Efficient IP and Infoblocks. You probably, I don't know if they have their versions of it up on their websites, not yet, but I'm sure they will eventually. But yeah, this link will lead to the report on our website. And with that, I'll turn it over to Raleigh for questions.
Thanks, Shamus. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and log them now. Let's jump into them. Shamus, the first one is this a new category of product I need to buy, or can I adapt tools that I already have?
Yeah, so it is a new category product that you can buy, but it's yes and yes. Yeah, there are vendors out there that develop net new products that they position as a network source of truth. Um, or the net, although some of them now are like moving beyond the terminology, and basically the network source of truth is the sort of the foundation of like a set of products that they're trying to develop. But or a platform they're trying to develop. And then you have like vendors that offer subsets of sources of truth, and that are evolving their products to expand what they can do. And then you probably have like a few tools in place, like an IPAM tool, DDI from a DDI vendor, maybe a CMDB. Maybe you got like three or four network controllers that have a lot of information about your network. You got maybe you got a inventory management tool like that handles third-party data from different systems, and you can pull all that. You can start syncing stuff, doing like, or but it is, it's going to be challenging if you're like trying to pull data together from like five or six or eight different things. You're going to want to have something probably that um, sort of syncs with other systems and can provide you a central repository. Um, but this is a it's still an emerging market. I think I think it'll take time to play out and see like exactly how mainstream enterprises establish a source of truth. But I think ultimately, um, you'll see some vendors expand what they can do, uh, so that they're not just a part of the solution, but the solution. And then you see other vendors that are offering solutions already. Um, but yeah, it's kind of up in the air.
Thanks, Shamus. Is the network source of truth only for network engineering teams? I feel like they have more potential than that.
Yeah, I mean, every time I interviewed someone for this research, I asked them like, who uses it? Network engineering was number one, obviously, or the network automation team, which might be like a separate group from network engineering. Um, and I talked to a lot of people who describe themselves as part of a net DevOps team, which is probably, I mean, I'm gonna be doing research on that next year, just like what is net DevOps. But um, that's like another example of like a subgroup or an adjacent group to network engineering, or maybe like an umbrella group over network automation and network engineering and operations. And then yeah, data center operations people will be using it. I've seen some people have like a separate network security group that will use it. Cybersecurity was occasionally using it to like gather data during an investigation of an event. Um, Upper management will use it. Like they might use it if like it's a mature enough tool that can give them reports on compliance, for instance, or um, uh, uh, the state of service contracts and things like that. Oh, and compliance teams. Just mentioned compliance. Like compliance teams, one thing that I think you'll see in the report is like some discussion about how a network source of truth is really good for like helpful for answering like audits, and supporting audits and demonstrating compliance and things like that. Um, and then a lot of people were talking about network source of truth in terms of like, hey, it's not necessarily a network source of truth, it's an infrastructure source of truth. I'm putting everything in there about my servers and my hypervisors. So like infrastructure teams, like systems engineering teams might start using it. So it's that's the thing about having an extensible data model. You can start to like put lots of different things in there, and it becomes useful to more and more people. And that's why you need role-based access control and stuff like that to make sure that no one touches things they're not supposed to.
Thanks, Shamus. This audience member wants to know what is the difference between network source of truth and system of record? They sound very similar.
Okay, I mean, I haven't really done research to like definitively say answer your question, but I would say that like in my thinking, like a system of record is like an authoritative source of data that can contribute to a network source of truth. So like I have a really good IPAM tool. I really trust all the data in it. I don't necessarily want to use it as a network source of truth, but I want it to be integrated with my network source of truth because it is the system of record for IP address space. So I want it to periodically sync with my network source of truth to provide me with an authoritative system of record for IP address space. So that's something that people do. Like there were people who were like, yeah, I'm integrating with specifically people who were saying they had a network source of truth were integrating with like the sponsors of this research, for instance. Although the sponsors of this research are also interested in not being complementary, but authoritatively a network source of truth. And yeah, I think you'll continue to see them evolve their products to help you there. But yeah, so like a system of record is an authoritative source of like part of what goes into your source of truth.
Thanks, Shamus. Let's take one more question. Cisco DNA Center serves this purpose for me, but I see a few gaps. What's a good path forward from there?
Um, so yeah, so Cisco DNA Center or Cattle Center, as they call it now, uh, is people tell me it has great inventory information and a lot of like visibility into the state of your network. And so, but it's not multi-vendor. I mean, I think they offer some multi-vendor capability, but like it's not going to be like the authoritative system of record or source of truth for um, your Palo Alto firewalls or your you know uh, your F5 load balancers, or maybe you have a multi-vendor data center. Maybe you have a multi-vendor distribution center or campus network. So I think that, and it's also not going to have everything that your network automation team wants. Like, does it have your entire IP address plan? No, it has information about the IP addresses associated with your Cisco devices. So it's a good source of information for Cisco stuff, but not everything that you might want in a source of truth. And so, like, I think what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to think about how you can build a data model that contains everything about your network, not just about your Cisco elements, and everything about your network that includes like your IP address plan and inventory information about everything that's connected to your Cisco stuff and everything that is, like servers and storage and power and cooling. Like you can do that in a source of truth if you build it right. You can have all that in your source of truth, not just your switches and routers and your access points from Cisco. Um, so think bigger than just your Cisco equipment when you're trying to think about a source of truth. That'd be my my advice on how to move forward.
Good insights, Shamus. Thanks. And I wanted to thank our audience for taking time out of your schedule to join us today. As I mentioned, you will be receiving a follow-up email from EMA later today that will include resources from today's event. So be sure to check that email out. Thanks again for joining us and enjoy the rest of your day.